Hi again to everybody, and welcome back to those of you that were here last week, and welcome to those who are new to the session today. As Lisa said, we're doing a series of webinars over the last, or since last week up to next week. Last week we looked at looking after our mental health. This week we're going to be looking at connection, which I think is a very important theme that we need to consider. And next week we're going to be looking at stress. So the aim of these webinars, and just for the purpose of those who are new to the session this week, I just wanted to cover that. So the overall focus of this is around offering some tips and techniques to really help about bringing around some positive change during these challenging times, particularly during this year that we've all experienced and shared together. As I mentioned last week, I'm all about uncomplicating and simplifying, especially when it comes to making positive changes. I think life can be complicated enough. We have enough on that sometimes we don't bring about changes because we feel that we maybe don't have the time. So if we can break things down and simplify, maybe we're more likely to do them. Also, something that I mentioned last week as well was around a lot of the things I'll talk about and have talked about and will talk about are things that you've probably all come across before. It's not necessarily something new, but what I have found in my line of work is that often we know what would be good for us to do, but we're not necessarily doing it. And again, that could be for various different reasons, or a lot of the time it's because we feel it is going to take too much effort, too much time. So what I really like to encourage in these webinar sessions is around making that shift from knowing what to do, knowing what would be good to do to bring about positive change, to actually doing something about it. So it's really, I guess, a seed I like to plant in these sessions to really think about that as I'm talking for the next 15, 20 minutes or so, in terms of what could ignite that shift in you to say, yeah, I know this, but I'm going to do something with it. And to me, that's the real success that comes out of these type of sessions. So as I said, today we're going to be talking about connecting with ourselves and connecting with others. So with regard to that, what I want to do first is just look a little bit around the importance of connection and the impact of insufficient connection. And I think that's something that we can all relate to some degree based on the year that we've had. And then from there, what I'd like to look at is some practical ways around, okay, we know this, so what can we do differently to help ourselves? Firstly, I just like to acknowledge as well that I do know we're all unique and all our circumstances are different. So while I'm going to be talking about connection today, it's not one blanket statement across everyone in the audience today to say it's the same for everyone. I'm very aware that it's not. We all have different circumstances and situations, and I do acknowledge that there are people living on their own, which has brought along many challenges over this past year. There are many people house sharing, which has brought challenges too. There are people with families or looking after loved ones, parents, etc. So just to acknowledge that what resonates for one or what applies for one may not be the case for somebody else. And also in the context of connection, we all might need it differently. So when I'm talking about it in the global sense, I do acknowledge as well that there are some people really crave that connection and have really significantly missed it over this last year, and others maybe not so much. I've talked to clients over the last year, and some are saying they cannot get back to society quickly enough, and others who are saying, I'm actually better than I thought I would be. And there might even be a level of anxiety coming with when doors reopen again in the coming weeks, months, and into next year as well. So just felt it was important to acknowledge that, and that hopefully what I talk about today will resonate to some degree with you all based on your own situation, circumstances, and personalities, etc. So just to get it started then, a statement here is our need to connect is as fundamental as our need for food and water. So it's a basic need that we have. If anyone remembers Maslow hierarchy of needs, it's right down there at the bottom. And I think many of us know that and knew that, but maybe not to the extent until connections were taken from us so abruptly back in March in 2020, when suddenly the whole country shut down and the whole world did, but for us locally here. So I just feel it's an important thing to state for us to acknowledge that and to say, yeah, this is quite significant and it's an important need that we have that maybe hasn't been met to the extent that we're used to. And coming from that as well is that as humans, we are hardwired to connect. Okay, we're biologically made up that way. And in the absence of it, it does have a substantially negative impact, or can have, should I say, impact on our well-being. And that will vary again from one person to the next. but it's an important thing, I think, for us to acknowledge. And coming from that as well, there was a study done recently with over 225,000 people. And what they found was there's been an increase in depression and anxiety, which I think many of you have probably heard about in the media, etc. But that has escalated dramatically since the pandemic, linked to the deterioration of relationships and connections that many have had. So that's quite substantial as well. And another piece of very interesting information I found was a study that was done in MIT, which said that we crave, or was found that we crave interactions in the same region in our brain where we crave food. And we also experience social exclusion in the same region where in our brain where we experience physical pain, which is quite substantial. So I guess the reason I'm sharing these points with you all is one, for us, I guess, to understand the extent to which it's important, and that maybe it is being underestimated by some of us, and that while there was a certain acknowledgement there in terms of the importance of our connections and missing it over this last year, maybe we didn't all realize to the extent to which it's having an impact on us. And that maybe somehow this can help people join the dots and help understand, okay, that might explain how I'm feeling the way I'm feeling. That might explain how I'm feeling a bit lost or a bit grey. I have clients who've been coming to me over the last year, and they wouldn't necessarily come directly and explicitly say, I'm here because I feel there's a lack of connection for me and therefore I want coaching. What they'll be coming for is saying, I'm feeling lost, I'm feeling disconnected, I'm struggling, I'm feeling I need change, but I don't know how to go about it. I used to be able to read myself better, and I'm not so much anymore. And when we worked through it, what they uncovered was that a big contributor to that was the fact that they were lacking connections to how they were used to. They weren't having the same chats with people, bouncing things off people the same way, sharing the same way, because everybody had a heavy load maybe to carry this last year. And so it was helping my clients make sense of this is what's going on and explaining it. So hopefully what I'm talking about here today might resonate with some of you to say, okay, that makes sense. I can relate to that, and that explains where I'm at. And so from that, what I would ask to do now is just to pause for a second and ask you all individually, how do you think your connections have been impacted in this last year since the pandemic? And you don't need to share that. It's more for you to self-reflect and think about. And as a result of those connections, how has that impacted you? And just to take that moment and even to think about it a little bit more offline. And again, drawing on what I said last week is when we can check in and see where we're at, then we know where we want to go from and we can fill in the gaps more. And I will be talking in a moment around some suggestions of what you can do to support yourself. But firstly, it's knowing where you're at. And I do acknowledge again, that'll differ from person to person. And so from there is when you understand the impact that might have had on you is to ask the question, is there room for improvement? Is there something I can do? Would I benefit from that? And if I could, what is it that I think I could do? And again, it's looking within to see what works best for you. And as I said, I will share some points in a moment, but it's always good to check in with ourselves because we know ourselves more maybe than I think we realize sometimes, and to know what it is that would be best for ourselves. And just something that I wanted to put out there to the group too is just something I'm wondering about, which is if we were to say physical distancing rather than social distancing, would that have changed things at all? Or would it even change things between now and when things open up more across the country? And I wonder if somehow subconsciously the fact that social distancing has been used since March last year, if not before, is that somehow, and I certainly, this has come up through my work as well, and even with myself personally, is that when we felt we couldn't we had to socially distance from people, people started thinking that meant we just didn't talk the same way that we did with people and that there was a disconnect. And yet what we really needed to do was just physically distance, but not socially distance, not connect and not to break that connection. So just to ponder on that, it's more food for thought for yourselves in terms of does that resonate and would that help at all with a shift in the language in how we're looking at this? And so if we flip things, I've looked there at the importance of and the impact of when there's a reduction, and again, varying from person to person. So if we flip it and use the coaching model, which is around focusing on the positive of having something rather than the negative of the lack of it, is saying with social connection, it is proven that it does have a positive impact on our sense of belonging, overall happiness, reducing stress, increasing self-worth, confidence, experiencing and sharing empathy, and our overall mood. So if we were to shift that focus and say, okay, if I know that that's good for me, how do I get more of it? And I'm wondering if even us looking at it from that perspective, would that in itself fuel for each of you to say, okay, it's knowing what I'm going to get, that's going to help me make that shift to doing something now about it to really enhance and enlighten it for me individually. So some reminders, and I've used the word reminder rather than tip because I do think that you all probably know this, but it's more again this reminder of, am I doing it? Could I do it a little bit more? And if I did, how can I benefit? So the first point I have here is around some bad habits. And what I mean by that is that while I think many of us were missing the connections that we were used to having, somehow we might have got into some bad habits of getting used to it. I think at the start of the pandemic, everybody was Zooming and doing pub quizzes and parties online, etc. Grandparents reading stories to the grandkids at night through Zoom and all of these amazing things. And while I think they're still happening, I think it kind of plateaued for a while and then it dipped because there was a level of fatigue with that as well. And so while we are missing, we kind of could have got caught in this rut of saying, okay, that's it, we're not seeing people and that's the way it is. So what it really takes is maybe an awareness of that and then to actually make the effort and to set that intention like anything. And I mentioned this last week too about for change to happen, we have to have an intention behind it to say, I intend to make this effort. So to reach out and to initiate, if we're waiting for others, it may not happen. So why can't we be the ones that make that effort and make that initiation? More so, this is not saying that none of us are doing it, but wherever we're at and wherever we're rating where we're at is to say, can we do a little bit more? And if so, what would that be? And what's my role in this? So that we're actively taking part. Another one then is text, call, Zoom, meet up, check in basically with people, find the mode that works for you or the combination of it. And I was talking with Lisa earlier on this morning, and she had a brilliant example of that. So I'm going to hand back to Lisa for a moment, who's just going to share with that because I think it's a really good example to illustrate the point.
Well, it was just yesterday, one of my friends, a girl I used to work with in Galway, we have a WhatsApp group, and she sent a voice note asking us for advice. Now, it was a sad topic. Her daughter's little kitten was killed on the road, and she was wondering what she should do about addressing this with her daughter. But it was a voice note rather than a text message. And then the rest of the other two girls in the group sent back voice notes, and I sent one. And it just was so lovely to hear their voices when we've all, as you said, become fatigued. And I think it's just making it more personal to hear their voice without having to commit to a phone call that you run out of things to talk about. So it was the best of both worlds. We got to give our advice, we got to hear each other's voices without it being a commitment and without having to dedicate time to this call. So yes, I suppose we do need to make the effort for it, but it is a nice way around to give somebody a little voice note maybe rather than a text message.
Absolutely, and thanks for sharing that one, Lisa, because I really do think it's examples like that of small things that have a big impact. And you were saying that after you just smile on your face for hours after. So it's how
Yes,
it's energizing us and it's bringing up our mood, which is supporting us in our well-being.
definitely, because once we give our tips on handling death, we did move on to lighter topics. So it did become a bit more fun.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot, Lisa. And so stemming from that is, and sorry, just firstly, I guess it's to acknowledge that yes, there's that element I think of Zoom fatigue, again, that I'm hearing more of, and all of that. But to say that while it mightn't be our preference to be on the phone or to be texting or to be on Zoom or whatever mode, is to say maybe it's better than nothing. So in the absence of being able to literally be close to people the way we used to be, is to say, this is an alternative. It's not going to be forever, but it's better than nothing. And you know what? Sometimes that small exchange like that can have a very positive impact. So feeding from that then is around being present. And again, I think this is probably very obvious and you all know it, But again, I think with the demands of life and how busy we are, sometimes we're not necessarily as present as we could be. So to think about that in terms of, think about when you are with someone and you feel they're very present with you, how good that feels. And think, drawing that into saying, okay, so when I am with someone, I want to bring that presence when I'm with them as well, so that the connection is meaningful, the exchange is meaningful. And something I've heard a lot too, and I include myself in this, is that sometimes we're looking for that hour to have that long call with someone, and we feel we can't find it. And then a week runs into 2 weeks to 3 weeks to 4 weeks, and suddenly we haven't talked to that person. So it's to say, again, could I do 15 minutes, but be present, not have distractions, and really be there, exchange, connect with that person. And that in itself is a tonic. And that we don't necessarily need to be looking for that longer time. We make it work, we break it down, we make it simpler for ourselves to get this. Ask, share, and listen. Again, all very standard things that I think we're all aware of, but do we do it? Are we asking questions? Are we checking in? Are we really listening? Are we exchanging? And if we are, that in itself is so powerful that it can really fill our bucket, filling our bucket of connection that we're lacking. And just on the share piece as well, that that old expression, a problem shared is a problem halved, which can really help us as well. And again, we're maybe reaching out to people less for advice, for support, for sounding boards because of this social distancing. But also that sometimes when we realize that when we share what's going on for us and the other person saying, you know what, I had that, or I experienced that, or I'm going through that, it helps us feel that we're part of something else, this shared human experience that we all have, our struggles, our battles, etc. That can really help. And then again, it's around being creative in this COVID physically distant world. So what can you do a little bit differently, even if it's not our preference, but it's better than nothing, or it's a bit more than something. So there's some reminders, as I said. I'm sure you're familiar with them, but hopefully one point even has resonated with you all to say, yeah, actually that could work, a little bit more of that, and I could be filling my connection bucket a little bit more. And then just on the final piece is around connecting with ourselves, because we must not forget us. And this is again drawing from last week when I was talking about self-care and looking after us. We need to do that with our connection, taking the time out to recharge that I referred to last week. Find your thing, do your thing. Someone was telling me the other day they went to the beach for the first time in 6 months and they couldn't get over how connected they felt just by being there for 10 minutes. And they thought, wow, I didn't realize how much I missed it till I got it. And I didn't realize how good it made me feel until I did it. And again, it's do your thing. What is it that helps you recharge and reconnect with yourself? I think any podcast I've listened to in the last year at some point will mention mindfulness or meditation. So there are proven facts behind that scientifically as well, that really helps us. So again, it's not for everyone or to every degree, but to consider it, to say, could that help? Could that help me just reconnect with myself, center myself a bit, and check in with you? We ask others how they are. We like when others ask how we are, but can we check in and see how we are doing ourselves and what do we need? And listen to that. I need a walk. I need a break. I need a timeout. I need a hug. I need a cry. And be okay with that and go for it, and to nurture yourself and to help yourself. And the final one then is breathe. Breathe again. I think it's an all-time classic. When you see the baby's belly going up and down and when they're breathing, that's how we should be breathing too. But quite often as adults, we're up here in the shallow breath, and just taking that moment doesn't mean we do it all day, but a few times in the day to just stop for a second, take the few deep breaths to just regroup, recenter, and then move forward. So that's it in my points. I just want to do a quick summary. I'm conscious of our time too, but it's just to think about how the reduced or lost connections might have had an impact on you. Do you think for you personally there's room for improvement? And if there is, or for change, what could you do differently or more of instead of to help with your connections with others and as well as yourself? So I'll hand back over to Lisa. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to seeing all of you or some of you next week.
Thank you so much, Derval. That was really great as usual. And I'm looking forward to next week's session as well, which is on managing stress, isn't it? I think, yes. So yes, thank you everyone for attending again today. Again, if you have any questions, please do email me, Lisa, or I'm Lisa at lmalloy@offalycoco.ie. And again, this session will be up on our website too. If you want to send it on to any friends, please feel free to do that. So again, thank you very much, Derval, and thank you everyone for attending.
Thanks, Lisa. Thanks, everybody.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.